First, before we start solving the primal and the dual relationship, you need to first understand. Okay, so if you have a primal, say it is a max problem, so you know the dual would be a min problem. Now, suppose in the primal I have say two variables and I have three constraints. Okay, so what will happen to the dual part? Can somebody tell me how many variables and how many constraints do I get in the dual? When you write the dual corresponding to this problem, if the primal has two variables and three constraints, how many variables and constraints will the dual have?
Three variables and two constraints.
Okay, so corresponding to each variable, I have one constraint. So this will correspond to two constraints in the dual, and corresponding to three constraints. So every constraint will correspond to one variable. So I'll have three variables in the dual. Okay, so this is one very major correspondence which you need to remember. Now, if I denote my primal variables as x1, x2, then obviously I use another alphabet for the dual, so usually I take it as y. You can also use any other alphabet if you want to. So your dual variables would be say y1, y2, y3. Now if you have three constraints here, then obviously every constraint in the primal will correspond to one slack or surplus variable. Okay, so let us say there are these three slack or surplus variables corresponding to these three constraints, unless it is an equality constraint, so that is a separate case, then you will have a associated artificial variable with that. But other than that, if you have either less than or greater than equal to constraints, you would have either slack or surplus. Okay, so let us suppose we have these three slack or surplus variables here. So here also we will be having the same say I call it S1 dash and say S2 dash. Okay, now I'll have again two slack or surplus corresponding to the constraints in the dual. Now how will I match is from the primal, if I want to read the solution of the dual, then the Cj minus Zj's corresponding to these three variables will be giving me values of these three. Okay, so corresponding to every constraint I have a slack or surplus, and the Cj minus Zj is here with or without sign reversal, that depends on whether it's a minimization or maximization. Okay, so I'm just taking the values for the time being. So the values of Cj minus Zj, the last row values against S1, S2 and S3 will correspond to the values of the three variables in the other problem. Okay, this holds both ways. So if I have to find out values of the primal variables using dual, I'll solve the dual and I'll have two values of Cj minus Zj for S1 dash and S2 dash. These would correspond to the values of the two variables in the primal. Okay, now the order in which you are going to take is corresponding to first constraint, your slack or surplus is S1. So its Cj minus Zj will give you value of the first variable. So you have to match the order. First constraint Cj minus Zj under S1 is going to match with first variable in the dual. Similarly, second constraint you will have a S2, corresponding to S2 you will have a C2 minus Z2 or your Cj minus Zj, and that value will be associated with your second variable here. Okay, so constraint number 1 here corresponds to variable number 1 here, constraint number 2 here corresponds to variable number 2, and so on. So this is how you are going to check the correspondence. Okay, similarly for the other direction, constraint 1 in the dual corresponds to variable 1 in the primal, constraint 2 in the dual corresponds to the variable 2, so x2 in the primal. Okay, so in this manner you are going to find the values of the other using one of them, and the main objective to use such correspondence or the use of duality is that at times it happens that one of the problems is complicated, the one which you need to solve is a complicated problem, but its dual may be comparatively simpler. Okay, so what we do is we solve the dual and then get the answer to the primal using the values of the dual. So or it may happen that suppose I have a starting problem which is this, which has three variables, so you can see that its dual will have two variables, and a two variable problem can be solved using the graphical method also. So that makes it easier to solve. I don't have to use simplex. Okay, so these are some advantages which the duality concept gives us. I mean, for your purpose, for the time being, there are other applications or significance of writing the dual as well, but for the time being you can think that the main objective why we are studying this concept is because if in case one of the problems is complicated, we can find its dual, and that is comparatively easier, so we can solve it, and hence we can get the solution to the primal also, and that will solve our purpose. Okay, without solving this complicated problem, we can solve a simpler problem and get the solution to the difficult one. So that is one, you can say, advantage of, or what is the main purpose of studying this concept of duality. Okay, although this is not the only purpose, but for your like level for the class, you should understand that this is the main objective. Okay. Okay, so is your doubt somewhat cleared, or you want to ask something else?
It's clear.
It's clear. Okay. Okay, so anyone else wants to ask anything? I had prepared some examples on some special cases of linear programming, the simplex problems, like in the end, if you get a specific type of a table, what does it imply? Okay. So I think, did I discuss this multiple optimal solution case with you? How do you recognize that in a simplex table, in the end, that you have a alternate optimum also? Like here you can see graphically all points on this line segment including the corners uh, are optimal solutions to this particular problem. Okay, that graphically you can make out because it is having the maximum value of z 2400, and everything in between will also have the same value. Now how it is getting reflected in the simplex is when you have this table. I'll just, let me know if you are not able to understand, because I thought I have discussed it. This is the last table which is there when you solve this by simplex, and here you are noticing, yes, yes,
We have already discussed.
okay, this one you've done. Okay, so I'll move to the second case then. This is the case where there is a situation of degeneracy. Degeneracy means when your basic variable has value 0. Okay, so how does it occur, and then what all implications it may have, or what all can be learned from regarding the problem from the occurrence of degeneracy. Okay, so again I have taken a 2-variable problem because we can then draw it graphically. The first constraint is given this magenta line, so it is below this line, and for the second constraint also it is below. So this blue shaded region is the feasible region. Now if you see the corners, you have these 3 corners, A which is 0 2, B 4 0, and then origin. And if we check the values of the objective function, it is the maximum at A, which is 18. Okay, so you can easily tell that, okay, this point A is your optimal feasible solution, and the value of objective function is 18. But you also note that one of the variables here is becoming 0, the first one is 0. So this tells you that the solution to this problem is a degenerate solution. Okay, because one of the basic variables which you will see in the table, that x1 is basic and the value of x1 is 0 here. Okay, so I'll show you. Okay, so this is the problem in the standard form. So according to the reference book, everything needs to be converted to minimization. So I'm reversing the signs of the coefficient, and first constraint is less than equal to type, so I'm going to attach a slack. Second is also less than equal to type, so I'll attach another slack and make them equal to signs. So this is my standard as well as canonical form. I have the identity matrix also. So I can start with the simplex. So initially the values of the basic variables would be 3 and 8. X3 and X4 are basic and their values are, sorry, 8 and 4 are the values, and the other two, X1 and X2, they are non-basic, so their values are 0. So this would be my initial table. Here I have all the coefficients. Here you can see the identity which is created, and this is the first Cj minus Zj. So the criteria says most negative would enter, so this would enter, and for the leaving criteria we'll calculate the minimum ratio. So I have sorry I have the ratio for the first row as 8 by 4, which is 2, and second row again it is 2. Okay, so both these ratios are same. Now in this case, say whichever I choose to depart, suppose I choose this one to depart, then this has to be made 1. So for that I am going to divide this whole row by 2, and then I will make a 0 here. And if I decide this to leave, then I have to divide the whole row by 4, and then I have to make this place 0. Now whatever I decide to do, since the minimum ratio 8 by 2 and 4 by 2, they are the same ratios which I am getting. So what will happen is, the one which I make a 0 here, correspondingly the same one will become a 0 in the XB column also. So I will just show you the next table. So here I have repeated the first table, this is the first table again. In the second table, I have made this position, this as your pivot element. Okay, so I am deciding this to be my pivot. So this is my entering, and x3 is the leaving variable. Okay, so whole row gets divided by 4, so this becomes 2, and here I want to create a 0. So for that my step would be, so first I do R1 is R1 divided by 4, and then R2 becomes R2 minus 2 times R1. Now in that process you would see that you get a 0 here as well. So that means your basic variable x4 has a 0 value, which means this is a degenerate solution. Okay, so intermediate table also has degeneracy, because still we haven't reached optimality, this is still negative. So this is an intermediate table, but there is degeneracy here also. Okay, and that occurs whenever you have the same minimum ratio occurring in more than one rows. Okay, so if your minimum ratio, if there is a tie, then in the next table you are going to get a degenerate solution. The position where you have created a 0, for that particular variable the value will be also 0. Okay, so this is observed whenever there is a tie for leaving variable. Okay, now if we notice the third table, so in the second table this would enter. Now here if I see the ratios, first ratio is 2 by 1 by 4, that is 8. Okay, and the second ratio is 0 by half, so which is 0. So which means obviously this one is minimum, so this one would leave. Now what all operations, I have to create a 1 here and a 0 in this place. So my steps would be, R2 is twice of R2, and R1 would be R1 minus 1 by 4 times. Once I have made a 0, then I do this 1 by 4 times R2. So then I will have this. Now you would notice one more thing, that the value which was 0 already remains to be 0, because for this particular row, what is your operation? You are just multiplying it with some number or dividing it with some number. So this 0 will not change, it will remain 0, and whatever other rows change will be there, but that does not make any difference to the degenerate behavior of the problem. So now optimality has reached, x1 is 0, x2 is 2, and you would say that this is the optimal solution. Also there is one more thing you will notice here, that value of the objective function is not improving. It was minus 18 here, and it remains minus 18 in the next table also. So this would also be a behavior in the table which you will note whenever you have a degenerate solution. Okay, and if I look back at the graph, if you notice this graph, you can make out that, suppose if I do not take this first constraint and I only refer to my second constraint, then also my feasible region will still remain the same. Okay, just ignore this first constraint and only look at the second and plot the feasible region. You will see that it is the same region as it was along with the first constraint. So I can say that this first constraint is redundant. Okay, Redundant meaning having this constraint in the system or having it outside the system doesn't make any difference to the feasible region. Okay, so in this case this constraint is redundant, and that is also due to the fact that this leaving variable, there is a tie for leaving variable. So as a consequence of a tie, you are going to get a degenerate solution, and consequently you will also see that if you are able to graph it, you would find that one of the constraints is redundant. Here also there are ways to check which is the redundant constraint, but that part we are not going to do. Okay, so that we are not going to see from simplex, but from the graph you can make out that one of the constraints, the first one, is a redundant constraint, and you don't need it in the system. Even without that, you are going to get a solution to your problem. Okay, so is this case clear to everybody? Any doubts in this special case? Okay, okay, so then I move on to the third case. This is a case of unbounded solution, and here if you see the graphical solution to this problem, it is a two variable problem, so we can graph it. You can see that you can increase your vertical, the x2 variable indefinitely, but x1 is bounded by this blue line, that is 20, okay, by this mark 20. So x1 doesn't exceed beyond 20, but x2 can increase indefinitely. And so if I draw these z lines, I can also see that my z can be made as large as I want to, and still I'll have some points from the feasible region which are going to satisfy the constraint set. Okay, so for this particular diagram, the corners which you have are only 3 of them. So 0 0, A 10 0, and then B is 20 10. These are the 3 corners which you get, and according to the corners, 50 is the maximum z value which you get, but that is not the optimal, because you can increase z even beyond this 50. So we would say that this problem has an unbounded solution. That is what we can do graphically. Now how to see it using simplex? Okay, so for simplex I again have to convert it to the canonical form or the standard form. So standard form is automatically giving me the canonical form also. I have attached x3 and x4 as the slack variables. Okay. So again my initial basic are x3 and x4, their values are 10 and 40, and non-basic are x1 and x2. This is the first table which is obtained from the equation coefficients, constraint coefficients. Okay, most negative is corresponding to x1, so this will enter. Then leaving criteria, you calculate the ratios 10 by 1 which is 10, and then 40 by 2 which is 20. So this is the minimum. Okay, so this is going to be the departing variable. This is your pivot element. This is already 1, so nothing is to be done for this. This place has to be made 0. Okay, so in my next table I will be doing the operation R2 is R2 minus 2 times R1. That will make this place 0, and so I'll get my next basic feasible solution. Okay, so I have repeated the first table here, and then this is the second. Now again there is a Cj minus Zj which is negative, so I am going to enter this variable in the system. So x2 enters, and for the leaving criteria I just have one variable which is eligible, because this has denominator strictly positive in the ratio part, so this would leave. So this would be 1 and this has to become 0. So your operations would be R2 is R2 by 2 and R1 is R1 plus R2. That will make a 0 here after you divide by 2 throughout. Okay, so then you get a 0, and again you calculate Cj minus Zj. Now which is the most negative? Again this one is the most negative. Which one should leave? So if you calculate the ratio, you see that for the first one denominator is 0, so this ratio is not allowed. For the second case again denominator is negative, so this ratio is not allowed. Okay, so you have a variable which can enter, which means there is an improvement possible in the objective function value. So we have seen that 50 was the value corresponding to one of the corners, and we said graphically that you can increase w beyond that, okay, when we took the original problem, which was max problem. So correspondingly min problem will have minus 50 value, and there is scope of improvement, which means we can make it still smaller, but there is no variable which we can decide to leave, neither of the two can leave, okay. So this is a situation when we say that the problem has a unbounded solution, okay. So how do you depict, or how do you make out an unbounded solution case? When there is a possibility of improvement which is indicated by a negative Cj minus Zj, or else you can say that you haven't reached optimality, that is again indicated by this number, and there is nothing which is to leave the basis. So none of the basic variables are allowed to leave, but you can still improve the solution. So in that case you would know that the solution is unbounded. So in case of a minimization problem, you would say it is unbounded from below, because you can make it as small as you want to, okay. In case of a max problem, you would say it is unbounded from above, okay. So is this case clear? The third case, is it fine? Have you seen any such questions in class? Have you done them? Have you seen such questions when you did? Have you practiced some questions other than what ma'am has discussed in class? No? Sejal?
No, ma'am, I
No.
can't recall this in class.
Okay, so such questions you may not have come across, but when you practice more and more questions on simplex, you may have a situation like this. So you should know how to then write the answer, because there is something to enter, nothing to leave. So you should not just leave it as it is. You should say that it is unbounded because this is negative, but the minimum ratios cannot be taken because they are either 0 or negative. So you have to conclude that it is an unbounded problem, okay. So I have taken these questions because they are originally 2 variable questions, and you can see them graphically also. But if you just have a 3 variable or a 4 variable problem to start with, then this is how you can recognize such situations using the simplex, okay. So otherwise you will get stuck if you do not know what this means, then you will just stop here and you won't know what to conclude after this, okay. So these were the cases I wanted to discuss. Okay, then I had prepared something regarding this method when you have artificial variables. So do you want me to discuss this, or are you clear with the artificial variable concept?
No, ma'am, please.
Okay. Okay, so this method which you have been taught in class is called the big M method, because you use a M for the coefficient of an artificial variable, and it has also another name given by Chance. So Chance penalty method is the other name. There are two methods in fact for solving questions which involve artificial variables. The other is called two-phase method, okay. Now your prescribed syllabus book has this method, the two-phase method, but I think ma'am has taught you this. So I'll discuss this also. Both are almost the same. The only thing is here, like these two phases have been clubbed into a single phase in this method. Okay, so that's the only difference. So you are performing actually the same steps, and you would be creating the same tables. The only difference is, instead of dividing the whole process into two phases, both the phases are clubbed into a single phase, okay. That is what this method does. So there is not much difference, only the representation is slightly different. Okay, now let us start with the problem. So this is my initial problem: minimize this particular expression. This is also a solved example from your prescribed book, okay. So I am taking that only, and here I have 4 variables. Now although I already have equality constraints, but I am not having variables which could serve as basic variables for this problem. Why? Because there is no variable which has a coefficient 1 in one of the equations and coefficient 0 in the other. Only that variable will become a basic variable, or will give me the identity matrix in the simplex table, okay. So what do we do in this then? Someone tell me. Sukriti, what do we do when we have such problems?
We'll subtract a slack variable and add an artificial.
Why do you want to subtract? It is already equal to this. Had it been greater than some number, then you would have subtracted something to make it equal. It is already equal, so then what do you do?
We can apply operations.
Anyone else knows what would be the answer? Khushi?
I don't know.
Okay. Anyone knows? Aditi? Yes.
Ma'am, we will add artificial
Yes, we will directly add artificials to both these constraints because we do not get the identity columns from these two constraints in the original form. There is no variable which is giving me coefficient 1 0, and there is no variable which is giving me coefficient 0 1, okay, in the system as it is. So I do not have any variable which I can claim to be basic in this form as it is. I may convert it to some other form and then find out, but if I refer to this problem straight away, I have no such variables. So in order to get a set of basic variables, I need to attach two new variables. So here I am using x5 and x6 for denoting artificial variables. Okay, so here my original variables are x1, x2, x3, x4 and x5, x6. These are the artificial variables. So I am going to attach artificial variables to both the constraints so that I can get my basic variables. So coefficient of x1 is 1 in this and 0 in the second. Similarly, coefficient of x6 is 1 in the second and 0 in the first. So I get the identity columns 1 0 and 0 1. So now this is the problem in the canonical form. What is the canonical form? Form where your objective function is minimization, your constraints are all equalities, your variables are all non-negatives, and you get a matrix, identity matrix from the coefficients of the two variables. If you have two constraints, you should have a 2 cross 2 identity in the system. So this is the canonical form. But since we have introduced these two variables, we have to make some changes in the objective function also before we can start solving, because these are not variables which are desired in the system. We have forced them to enter the system so that we can get the identity. There is no other use of these variables here. Okay, slack and surplus have a special significance. Slack tells us how much is less. Okay, like if you have a less than equal to sign in the constraint, then how much is less on the left side, that is given by slack. So if some expression plus slack you take up, that equals to some number, say 50, it means that whatever here you are using, that is short of 50 by a certain number which is the slack. Similarly, surplus also has a significance. It tells you how much is extra on the left side, okay, so that you get it equal to the right hand side. But artificials have no such significance. They are only added to the system to create identity matrix, and so we want them to be out of the system as soon as possible. So for that, what we do, anyone can tell me what we do for this? You have started doing questions on yes.
Add m into x5 and m x6 to the minimized problem.
Okay, so you add two expressions of this type, m into x5 and m into x6 in the objective function. Since it is a minimization problem, we are going to add. If it is a maximization problem, then you are going to subtract. Okay, now why do we add these? What is the reason behind adding these? How will that help us in getting rid of x5 and x6 faster? Will that help us?
Because m is considered to be very large.
Okay, so how does adding?
If Yeah, so if we'll add a very large number, like m is very large, in like it's a minimization problem. So obviously, if a very large number is being added with a coefficient and with a variable, then it will be discarded very early.
Okay, so that is the reason basically, and that is why it is also called the penalty method. Because suppose if I have my x5 in the final answer to be 1, or at any stage if my x5 is assuming some non-zero value, say 1, then corresponding to that my objective function, which is z star in this case, will be increased by m units. So automatically simplex will try to drive out x5 of the system. Okay, it will say I don't need x5 because it is giving my z a very big value. So in most of the cases your objective function in case of a minimization problem would be the cost function, and you would want to make it as small as you want as possible. So if you have x5 to be something non-zero, this will be increasing by this huge m, and therefore you are sort of paying a penalty for having x5 in your system. Okay, so this m is the penalty which you are paying for having x5 in your basic solution when your x5 is some non-zero value. Okay, so that is why it's called the penalty method. So simplex, what it will do is it will try to drive this out as well as this, because they are giving such huge values to our objective function and we want to make it very small. So it is basically against it is opposite of what we want to do. So simplex is going to drive these two variables out of the system. Okay, so that is why we attach a plus m here and a minus m for a max problem, because again that is going to solve the same thing. Okay, so this is the final problem which we are going to solve using simplex if we have artificial variables in our system. If we have slack or surplus, then our z doesn't change, it remains as it is. We do not attach any any slack or surplus in the objective function. But if they are artificial, then we need to attach them with a big M coefficient for minimization, and we need to subtract them for a max problem. Okay, now I'll just show you the tables. So here is the first table. This is from the constraints only. You have these coefficients. These are coefficients of the variables in the objective function, the new one which you have constructed. This is the right hand side, and x5 and x6 are your basic variables. Now if you calculate the Cj minus Zj part, you would notice that there is one which is having a minus 2m. So since m is a very big number, this is going to be a very big negative number, you can say. So there is optimality has not been reached, and so you need to improve on this. And current z value is 14m. So that means your objective function is very large at this point of time. Okay. Now if you proceed to the next table, this would be entering variable. For the leaving variable, you have these two ratios 3 by 1 and 11 by 1. So this is the minimum. So this is your departing variable. This is your pivot element. Pivot element has to be made 1, it is already 1, and here you have to make a 0. So your operation would be R2 is R2 minus R1. Okay, and you make changes throughout till this 11. Okay, so the whole row has to be changed. So that gives you the second table. Okay, so this has also changed to 8. Now if you notice, again you have Cj minus Zj's which are negative. Okay, so which one is the most negative out of these? Someone can tell me. 7 minus 5m. So what you are going to first check is the coefficient of m. This would be the deciding factor when you compare these Cj minus Zj. So here coefficient is minus 1, here it is minus 5, here it is minus 3. So obviously this is more negative. So first check the coefficients. The one with the bigger coefficient is a bigger number. This finite part doesn't make much difference unless your coefficients are also the same. Okay, so if the coefficients also match, then you compare the other part, the finite part, but otherwise what will dominate is the coefficient. So this is the most negative Cj minus Zj. So this is going to be your entering variable. For the leaving variable, you just have one option, and the ratio is 8 by 5 because for the other option the denominator becomes negative, so that is not allowed. Okay, so this would be your leaving variable. This is your pivot element. This has to be made 1. So you are going to divide this whole row by 5. So your R3 is R3 by 5, and then you are going to make this place 0 by using this 1 which is created. So your operation would be, sorry, this is R2, and for the first row it is R1 plus 3 times R2. Okay. So that will give you the second table, sorry, the third table. So here you have made this 0, other values will change according to this operation in the first row, and you again have a Cj minus Zj which is negative. These two Cj minus Zj's are positive because m is a very large number. So even if you subtract something like 1000 from m, you will still get a positive number. Okay, so imagine m to be the biggest number which you are aware of, and then you can easily compare the Cj minus Zj's to decide which is the most negative. So these two are positive, the only negative one is minus 2 by 5. Okay, so this will be my entering, and leaving variable obviously is x3 because this is the only ratio which you can take. So this would be leaving. So this is your pivot element. So you need to multiply this entire row by 5, and then this becomes 1, and this has to be made 0. So I'll just move on to the next. This is the last iteration. So I've made a 1 and a 0, and accordingly everything changes. And now you can see that your basic variables are x1 and x2, and all your Cj minus Zj's are greater than equal to 0. Your Z has reduced to 14. So initially when we started, I'll just show you, it was 14m. So that was a huge number. Then it got reduced to 8m plus 6. This is obviously smaller than this. Then it was further reduced to this number 86 by 5. This had no m now because both the artificials have left the basis. Firstly x5 left, then x6 left. So in this third table you do not have any artificials, and in the final table your value of Z is 14. That's the optimal value which you can obtain for Z star, and since there are no more artificials, it will be the same for your original Z also, because the only difference between these two expressions Z and Z star is the presence of artificials in Z star. That's the only difference. So since no artificial is present here, it means that all the other variables are having value 0. So x1 and x2 are given by this table, x3, x4 and the two artificials, they are all zeros. Okay, so all these variables are 0, which means your Z star and Z values are the same, and your optimal value is 14. Okay, so that is how you solve such questions when you have either when you have an equality constraint and you are not getting an identity column, or when you have a greater than equal to constraint. In this case, in order to convert it to equality, you need to subtract a surplus. Now when you subtract a surplus, its coefficient is -1, so you do not get an identity column. So correspondingly you again add a artificial so that you get a coefficient 1 here, and so you will get the identity column, and this will be equal to whatever your right hand side is. Say you have a 5 here, so you will get it equal to 5. Okay, so in these two circumstances we need to attach artificials if we are not getting identity in the original system. If we already have an identity column, then you need not attach artificials. Okay, so it is not mandatory to every time attach an artificial whenever you get equal to or greater than equal to. You only need to attach when you do not get the identity columns, or you do not get variables which can serve as basic variables. Okay, otherwise you can avoid. These are not desirable in the system. Okay, so you can avoid using them. Anything else you want to ask from this? Should I proceed if you have understood? Okay. Okay, so I've just tried to summarize the final table interpretation. Like when you have a problem which has artificial variables and you reach the final table, then how to give the answer. Okay, so the first situation is when there are no artificial variables in the basis. So when you have made all of them remove the table, then they will not appear in the basis, and you have reached the final table which means all your Cj minus Zj's are either greater than equal to 0 or less than equal to whatever your problem is, max or min. Now in that case you would say that the solution you have obtained is optimal, basic, feasible, and the constraint equations are consistent. So this is a regular problem which you will face, and in most of the questions you are going to get this as your final solution. Now the second case, you may have some artificial variables which are present in the basis, and but they have zero value. So this is a case of degeneracy. Okay, so you are getting a degenerate solution, your optimality criteria is satisfied, so you have reached the final table, but there are some artificial variables that are present which have zero value. So zero value means your solution is degenerate, and I just discussed the case of degeneracy, that there might be a case of redundancy in that case. Okay, whenever you have a degenerate case in the final table, it may happen that one of the constraints is not required, it's redundant. Okay, so that situation may occur, but that is not going to alter the way you are going to write the answer to your question. Okay, so your answer would be written in the same manner as you have done in the first case if you have this situation. And the third situation which may occur is that you may have a basic artificial variable which is there in the basis, but it is having a positive value. So if it is having a positive value and you have reached your optimality criteria, then what is going to happen is that you would say the original problem has no feasible solution. Okay, so what do you conclude in this case is that the problem with which we had started has no feasible solution. Okay, because you are not able to get rid of these artificial variables. So this is mainly because there may not be a feasible solution, either because the constraint equations are inconsistent, or because these there are solutions but none of them is feasible. So this is like a summary of the solution techniques which you should adopt in case you have an artificial variable in your system. Now next I am going to take up two variable problem, where I am going to illustrate what it means when you have artificial variables in your system, and since it is a two variable problem, we can easily graph the problem. So here I have drawn the graph of the problem. My first constraint is this magenta line, corresponds to the first constraint, and the feasible region is in this direction. For the second constraint, the corresponding line is this blue line, and feasible region again is in the upward direction. And similarly for the third constraint, it is given by the green line and the feasible region is in the upward direction. So in order to solve it using simplex, we first need to change these inequalities to equalities, and for that, so I have just taken the constraint part here. So in my first constraint, I am going to attach a slack variable so that it becomes equality. In the second constraint, I again will be attaching another slack and I will make it equal to 0. And in my third constraint, I am going to attach a surplus variable, since I have a greater than equal to sign in the inequality, and so correspondingly I also need to attach an artificial variable in the system. So this will be the constraint set for the new problem which you are going to solve using simplex. Now when we are going to solve this using simplex, the initial basic feasible solution which we have for this particular problem will have the basic variables as S1, S2 and A1. So S1 will have value 3, S2 will have value 0 and A1 will have value 12. So initially when you start, you have these as your basic variables, and therefore the remaining ones are non-basic. So your x1 and x2 both will have a value 0. So if you see this particular point with respect to your original problem, and if you see in the graph, you would find that corresponding to this particular solution, in the original problem, the point which you are talking about is origin. So this is the point where your solution point lies in case you introduce artificial variables, and you can see clearly here that this is not a part of the feasible region. So as long as your artificial variables are in the system, you are not touching the feasible region of your original problem. So you are outside the feasible region, and you would notice that when you solve this problem by simplex and these artificials get eliminated, then ultimately you are going to reach the corners of the feasible region, and then depending on which corner is the best one, you are going to get the finite solution in case it is having a finite solution, or else you may get a unbounded solution. So that depends later on, but initially you can visualize this, that whenever we have an artificial variable in the system, the corresponding point is not a part of the feasible region, it is outside the feasible region. So that shows why these artificial variables are not desirable in the system, and that is why the simplex method automatically drives them out of the system and ultimately moves to feasibility. Okay. So that is all I wanted to tell you today. Thank you.